Okay, let's unpack this. We've got quite a collection here. Research papers, articles, even a podcast transcript, all about sleep.
Yeah, it's a real mix, isn't it? It goes from the really fundamental stuff, what sleep even is,
Hmm.
right through to how it links up with our health.
And then down to like practical things you can actually do.
Exactly. Evidence-based stuff.
So our mission really is to sift through all this for you. We want to figure out, okay, what is sleep scientifically? How does it connect to mental health, immunity, these big areas?
Mm,
And then pull out the actionable, the solid advice based on the science, the clinical trials, all that.
right. Because it's not just about feeling rested, is it?
Right.
There's real biology happening.
Totally. It's about understanding that connection to your overall well-being. So let's dive in. Maybe start with the biggest question. What is sleep? Why do we need it?
It's kind of wild that we still don't have the definitive answer.
Yeah, why does the brain have to go offline every night? It seems pretty fundamental.
Well, the sources point to a few leading hypotheses. One camp focuses on, higher level brain functions.
Like learning, memory.
Exactly. Processing the day's input, consolidating memories, tweaking the connections between neurons, synaptic plasticity, they call it, basically sorting and filing.
Okay, strengthening important connections, maybe getting rid of unimportant ones.
That's the idea. Then the other major group of theories is more about um, housekeeping, basic maintenance.
Housekeeping, like cleaning.
Yeah, pretty much. Restoring energy balance in the brain, making essential molecules, and importantly, clearing out metabolic junk that builds up when we're awake.
Ah, so like a nightly deep clean for the brain cells.
That's a good way to put it. And any good theory has to explain a few things, right? Like
Right.
why sleep changes so much across our lifespan.
Right, baby sleep loads, older people often less.
hmm And why, if you miss sleep, you feel this intense pressure to catch up. That's homeostasis.
Got it.
And, why the brain needs to be offline for these jobs and why we have different stages of sleep, like slow wave sleep, SWS, seems really important.
Okay, so if it's still a bit mysterious, how do researchers even measure it properly? Because just asking someone, how'd you sleep, isn't the whole story.
Definitely not. The gold standard in the lab is polysomnography, PSG.
That's the one with all the wires.
Yeah, basically
Mhm.
sensors for brain waves, the EEG muscle activity, eye movements, heart rate, breathing, oxygen levels. It gives a super detailed picture, tells you exactly which sleep stage you're in, when.
Okay, the full picture. But you can't do that at home easily.
Right. So for tracking sleep longer term, in a real world setting, there's actigraphy, usually a wrist device.
Like a fitness tracker?
Sort of, yeah. It mainly tracks movement, so it could estimate, total sleep time, how long it took you to nod off, how fragmented your sleep was.
But it can't tell deep sleep from light sleep.
Exactly. It knows you were still, but not the quality of that stillness. And then, of course, you have the subjective measures, sleep diaries, questionnaires like the PSQI or the ISI,
How you feel about your sleep.
which is crucial.
Mm.
But, as the sources point out, sometimes there's a gap between how someone reports their sleep and what the objective measures show.
Interesting. Both are valuable pieces of the puzzle then.
Absolutely.
Okay, now this is where it gets really impactful for everyday life. The connection between sleep problems and mental health. The sources seem really strong on this.
Oh, it's a very strong link. Insomnia is a huge focus. We kind of all know what that feels like. Trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up way too early.
Or just feeling completely unrefreshed.
Right. And the formal criteria, like in the DSM, look at how often it happens, how long it's been going on, and crucially, if it's messing up your daytime functioning.
And what about that gap between subjective feeling and objective measurement with insomnia? What do the
Oh,
PSG studies show?
it's fascinating, actually. PSG does usually show issues in people with insomnia. Less total sleep, takes longer to fall asleep, more waking up during the night, maybe a bit less deep or REM sleep.
So there are measurable differences.
Yes, but often those objective changes aren't quite as severe as the person's subjective experience of poor sleep. Their distress is very real, very high, even if the machine says they got some sleep.
That feeling of poor sleep is powerful in itself.
Absolutely. And the consequences. Studies mention, especially in younger people like teens and university students, they consistently link sleep problems with higher rates of depression, anxiety, even aggression and behavioral issues.
Wow. That's a tough time of life anyway, adding sleep problems on top.
Exactly. And one study looked at university students, even those who were generally sleeping okay-ish.
Yeah.
It found that overall poor sleep quality, and specifically the frequency of waking up during the night, was more strongly linked to mental health stuff like anxiety, stress-related physical symptoms, and general psychological distress than just the total hours they slept.
So waking up a lot is maybe worse than just sleeping a bit less in some ways?
It seems to be a really important factor for mental well-being in that group. Quality and continuity, not just quantity. And it matters because student sleep often deteriorates, right? And even short-term issues can have these knock-on effects for mental health.
Makes sense. Okay, moving on slightly. The immune system connection. This sounds complex, a two-way street.
Very much so. And it's tightly regulated by sleep and our internal body clock, the circadian rhythm. Sleep isn't passive for the immune system, it's scheduled maintenance time.
Okay.
So early in the night, especially during that deep, slow wave sleep, certain immune cells involved in identifying new threats and kicking off a response, the naive T cells, some inflammatory signals like IL-1, TNF, they tend to peak.
So the surveillance system ramps up?
Kind of. Then during the day, when you're awake, other immune cells, the ones more involved in immediate fighting, like natural killer cells and anti-inflammatory signals, tend to be higher.
Interesting balance.
And really importantly, sleep seems to help guide immune cells, especially T cells, to where they need to go, like lymph nodes. This is critical for mounting an effective adaptive immune response, the specific kind, and for forming immunological memory.
Ah. So sleep helps your immune system remember how to fight bugs it's seen before, like with vaccines.
That's the theory, yeah.
Yeah.
Consolidating that immune memory.
Oh.
And the flip side is clear. Not enough sleep or constantly disrupted sleep messes with your immune function.
How so?
Well, research shows it can suppress genes needed to fight viruses while actually increasing genes linked to inflammation. There are studies showing people with poor or short sleep have a weaker antibody response to vaccines, like the flu shot or Hep B.
Wow, so it directly impacts how well your body protects itself.
It seems to. And the mechanism likely involves stress pathways. Fragmented sleep activates the sympathetic nervous system, your fight-or-flight response. And that stress signal seems to push the immune system towards inflammation. It triggers pathways like NF-key, which basically flips the switch for lots of inflammatory genes. It also mobilizes certain types of immune cells, sometimes called stress leukocytes.
So bad sleep equals stress, which equals inflammation.
That seems to be a major pathway. And chronic lack of sleep or chronic disturbance is linked to this persistent low-level inflammation throughout the body.
Which isn't good long term.
Definitely not. It's seen as a potential risk factor for a whole host of chronic diseases, neurological problems, cardiovascular issues, metabolic disorders, even chronic pain.
Okay, but I've heard, and the sources mention this too, that long sleep is sometimes linked to inflammation markers as well. How does that work?
Yeah, that's the confusing part. Population studies sometimes find markers like CRP, IL-6, TNF are elevated in people who sleep very short and very long durations, like over 8 or 9 hours.
Seems counterintuitive.
It does. The thinking often is, for the long sleepers, there might be an underlying health problem or maybe lifestyle factors that are causing both the need for extra sleep and the inflammation. So the long sleep might be a symptom, not the direct cause of the inflammation itself.
Correlation, not causation.
Exactly. It's complex. Needs more research to untangle cause and effect and the balance between pro and anti-inflammatory signals.
Got it. The sources also briefly mention experimental stuff, like giving immune signals makes you sleepy.
Yeah, giving cytokines can induce sleepiness, though the effects on actual sleep stages in humans can be mixed. And sometimes anti-inflammatory drugs have unexpected effects on sleep in people compared to animals. It just highlights the complexity.
Oh, and interestingly, a natural inhibitor of inflammation actually seems to increase after sleep deprivation, maybe as the body trying to compensate.
Okay, so clearly sleep is vital. Problems are common and impactful. What can people do? Let's talk interventions.
Right, moving to solutions. A big one, backed by strong evidence, is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI.
I've heard of that. Yeah, it's considered the first-line treatment. The sources mentioned a clinical trial on university students using CBTI. They used a proper randomized controlled trial design.
The gold standard for research.
Exactly. And they measured not just insomnia severity, but also looked at things like paranoia and unusual sensory experiences using specific questionnaires.
And did it work?
The implication is definitely positive for sleep outcomes and potentially for those related mental health aspects too. But beyond just feeling better, other sources highlight that CBTI has measurable physiological effects.
Like what?
Studies have shown it can actually lower levels of those inflammatory markers. We talked about CRP, TNF, IL-6 in people with insomnia. This has been seen in primary insomnia, but also in groups like breast cancer patients or dialysis patients who often struggle with sleep. It even influences immune gene expression.
Wow. So it's not just psychological, it's actually reducing biological inflammation risk.
Precisely. It shows these behavioral interventions can have deep physiological impacts.
Okay, that's powerful. Now let's get really practical, the toolkit approach. Starting with behavior, which the sources really emphasize as the foundation.
Absolutely. This is where everyone can start.
Mhm.
First up, light. It's huge.
Yeah.
Getting sunlight in your eyes, preferably outside, soon after waking, like within the first hour.
Why outside?
The intensity is just vastly higher than indoors, even on a cloudy day. Windows filter out a lot. The sources give specifics. Maybe 5 minutes on a clear day, 10 if cloudy, 20-30 if really overcast.
Okay.
This blast of morning light helps anchor your body's internal clock, your circadian rhythm. It's pure physiology, not woo-woo stuff. You can even use a light meter app to see the difference.
And the flip side? Evening light.
Just as important, avoid bright lights, especially overhead lights, in the evening after sunset. Dim them down, use lamps placed low. Candlelight or moonlight is very low intensity. There's even a suggestion that seeing the sunset might buffer some negative effects of artificial light later.
Light is the master signal. Got it. What's next? Temperature.
Yep. Temperature might seem weird, but a short blast of cold early in the day, think a 1-3-minute cold shower, can actually trigger a rebound increase in core body temp afterwards, boosting alertness via adrenaline, dopamine.
Interesting.
Then in the evening, the opposite logic applies. A hot bath or shower helps radiate heat away from your core after you get out, causing a drop in body temperature, which signals sleep.
That makes sense.
And keeping your bedroom cool is really key for staying asleep. If you wake up hot, just sticking your hands or feet out from the covers helps dump heat.
Okay. Cool room, maybe a warm shower before bed. What about timing exercise and food?
Exercise early in the day also raises core temp and alertness. Good
Yeah.
thing. But avoid intense workouts too close to bed, as that can delay the cooling process needed for sleep.
Right.
Food-wise, eating bigger meals earlier tends to support daytime alertness and metabolism. Try to avoid huge meals right before bed. Digestion can be disruptive. Some people do well with early time-restricted feeding, basically fasting later in the day, but that's more individual.
And the big one,
Yeah.
caffeine.
Caffeine. The advice is strategic. Try delaying your first cup for 90-120 minutes after waking.
Why?
It lets your body clear out some leftover adenosine, that sleepiness molecule. This can help prevent that afternoon crash where you then reach for more caffeine, messing up sleep later.
Makes sense. Avoid the cycle.
And the absolutely critical thing is avoiding it late in the day. Even if you think you sleep fine after an afternoon coffee, studies show it messes with your sleep architecture, less deep sleep, more fragmented.
Even if you don't feel it consciously.
Exactly. Keeping total daily intake, maybe under 100 milligram, is suggested as potentially optimal for sleep, but obviously individual tolerance varies a lot.
Good to know. Any other quick behavioral hits?
Yeah, non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR, and Yoga Nidra. These are basically guided relaxation protocols, lots available free online. They can help you fall asleep or fall back asleep if you wake up. The Reverie app gets a specific mention.
NSDR.
Also, focusing on nose breathing during sleep. Some people use mouth tape. It's linked to helping with sleep apnea, but might be beneficial generally for sleep quality. There's a book mentioned on this topic.
Interesting.
And of course, consistency. Trying to stick to a regular sleep-wake schedule, even on weekends within about an hour or so. Plus, understanding how timing light and activity relative to your body's natural temperature minimum can help you shift your schedule if needed, like for jet lag or shift work.
Okay, so that's a solid foundation of behavioral stuff. Then maybe think about supplements.
Exactly. The sources frame supplements as something to explore after you've optimized the behaviors. They aren't the first step.
Right. And what specific ones are mentioned in this sleep stack?
3 main ones. Magnesium threonate, typically around 145 milligram, apigenin, about 50 milligrams, and L-theanine, somewhere between 100 and 400 milligrams.
And you take these.
Usually 30 to 60 minutes before bed, ideally not on a totally full stomach. Can take them alone or together. Small note, magnesium threonate might cause some mild stomach upset for a few people.
Okay, that's the core stack. Anything else?
Myoinositol is also mentioned, usually 900 milligrams. The suggestion is it might be particularly useful if you tend to wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep. You can take it along with the others.
Got it. And what about things like CBD or THC? People talk about those for sleep too?
They get a brief mention. The source suggests their benefit might be more about reducing anxiety, which indirectly helps sleep, rather than directly targeting sleep mechanisms like the other supplements discussed. So kind of outside that main behavioral plus targeted supplement framework.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, What's the big picture take-home message from all this?
Well, I mean, sleep is just fundamentally crucial, isn't it? It's
Mm.
not just downtime. It impacts everything: mental clarity, mood, how well your immune system works, your risk for chronic diseases down the line,
Mm.
often through mechanisms like inflammation.
And sleep problems are super common, have real consequences, including those measurable biological changes.
Yeah, but the good news is there are effective things you can do. CBTI is a validated therapy that changes physiology, not just feelings.
And that behavioral toolkit is key.
Absolutely. Mastering light, temperature, timing your food and exercise, maybe using things like NSDR. That's the foundation.
Mm.
It's powerful stuff based on solid science. The supplements are maybe a layer on top of that, if needed.
Right. So, a final thought for people listening. Given this deep connection between sleep, immune memory, and inflammation, how might really prioritizing sleep, maybe especially when you're stressed or fighting something off, actually change your body's fundamental ability to stay healthy in the long run? That's definitely something worth thinking about.